So in this video, I want to look at the way that Revit files elements and objects within its filing system and the way that we can manipulate that to make our life a little bit easier. So the first topic to talk about is elements. So every object, every modeled item, or every piece of text within Revit is known as an element. We've touched on before this idea of being able to hide elements within a view. So every one of these pieces of line or text or wall or door in this view is an element, and we can hide it separately within the view and manipulate it that way. So if I click on this piece of wall, I can go hide in view by element, and it will hide the element that I have selected. If I select more than one element, if I select one, hold down Control and select a second element, and right click hide in view by element, I'm still hiding the elements, and it's the elements that I have selected, and it will hide those elements within the view. Also within that hide menu, and as I've touched on briefly before, if we select an object and we right click, we can hide in view by its category. So the category within Revit is the high level division of objects. So all the walls in the model are in the wall category, all the doors are in the door category, all the floors get put into the floor category, and it's a way of Revit identifying and separating different elements within the building that it treats differently. It manipulates walls and floors differently from each other, so it needs to know which one's a wall, which one's a floor, and has them filed separately. So I've just drawn a little diagram off to the right hand side here. So at the high level of our separation, we have categories. So a wall is a type of category. Down the bottom here we have elements. So every object within Revit is an element. So when we're hiding objects in a view, we can either select one, right click, hide in view by element, or if we hit category, we'll hide all of the walls in the view like that. So categories are a high level separation of objects within Revit. Within each category, there are types of the object. So in the walls, we have a wall category. That's every single wall that is in the model is in that category. But within that, each of these walls are a different type. They're built differently. They represent a different construction method. So in this little drawing here, I've got 5 walls. 2 of them are block. If I hover over them, it says it's a 200 BLK or block wall. These 2 here are that type. These 3 here are a different type. They're a timber framed wall. And if I hover over them, it says it's 90 timber with 25 linear and 10 mil jib. So these are different types of walls within the overall wall category. And they get lumped together as being the same type. Each element that relates to a wall type or an object type gets called an instance. So again, to explain it a little bit further, I'm drawing this little diagram. So we've got the wall categories, the overall wall category itself. Each object within that category is an element. But further dividing it down, we have different wall types within the category, and each piece or each wall that we put in the model that relates to a type is called an instance of that type. But instances and elements are effectively the same thing, but in terms of the way that we manipulate the objects within the model, an instance relates to its type, the element relates to its category, but the type also relates to its category. So hopefully this little diagram explains the relationships between these different names, and we can use them in different ways, and Revit uses them in different ways to manipulate objects. So as I said, these are wall types. These 2 here are block wall type, these are timber wall types, and we've got 2 different types of doors. We've got a door that's a smaller 710 wide door, the one door type, and these are another door type. So if I click on an object or right click on an object and bring up this menu, I can select all instances of a type that is visible in the view. So again, instances relate to types. If I'm selecting all the instances in the view, visible in the view, I'm selecting all instances of that type. So all instances or all objects that relate to the type that the one I've selected relates to, and I can select all those. So if I click on that visible in view, select all instances, it will select the 3 doors that are that door type. It doesn't select these 2 doors because they're the same category, but they're not the same type, therefore they're not instances of the same door type. Similarly, if I right click on a wall, select all instances, visible in view, it will select the 3 timber walls, not the 2 block walls. These are instances of that wall type within the model, or within the view, sorry. You might see there's another option there, select all instances. I can select all those instances in the entire project. So if I've got a whole lot of timber walls in the building that I'm drawing, and I want to change them all or manipulate them some way, I can actually grab them all in one operation, select them all, even if they're not visible in the view that I'm in, it will select them and I can manipulate them from there. So that's the way that Revit files things within its system. We have categories, we have types, we have instances, and we have elements. If I select an object, an element, its type is displayed in the properties box up here. And while that's displayed, I can actually change the type of wall that it is by selecting one from the drop-down menu, and I can actually make it the same as the other timber framed walls. I can find it in the list here. It's there, and it will change its type. It's still a wall, it's just a different type of wall, and it looks different. So that's how we change walls within Revit, change objects. We select them, we change their type, or we create a new type if we need to, and then we can change the way that they are built up within Revit, even though they're still in the same category. There's another example. This door here is the 710 door. If I want to change that, drop its type down, I can change it to the 810 wide door. Sometimes it doesn't do anything till you click back into Revit. But we've now changed the door type. It's still a door, but it's an 810 door and not a 710 door. And it's not the 860 door that these are. So even though these doors, when you click on them, their type appears to be identical, the only difference between them is the size of the door leaf and the name that appears up in here. They are different door types. So this one here, I've just changed it to the 810 door. If I click on that and I select all instances of that door, that is the only door in that view of that type, even though the other doors are the same larger grouping or similar types, they are not the same type and it won't select them. So every object within Revit has a type and a category. These pieces of text, for example, that text notes, if I click on it, the properties box tells me it's a text, it tells me the size of the text. That type, that name there, the 7mm Arial, is its type. If I drop that down, I've got a selection of other types and I can change the text type. They're still pieces of text, but they are different types of text. So I've now got 2 types of text. I've got the 7mm here and the 5mm over here. So I can manipulate and change the type when I've got it selected. So for example, if I really want to grab all the timber walls and change them to block in this diagram, in this drawing, I right click, select all instances, visible in view of that type of wall. It will select these 3 here, which are the 3 of that type. If I drop the type down, I can change them all to the 200 block, and they will appear the same as the rest. And now the same type of wall as this one here always was, and this one here is a different one. Okay, that's a 94mm timber, not the 90mm timber. But I can change that as well if I wanted to the block wall. This is how we change lots of objects within Revit by selecting the instances of the type and then manipulating the type and changing it. The other thing I want to cover here is the idea of groups. So within Revit we can create groups, either a temporary group or a permanent group within our project that allows us to bind together various elements from different categories and different types into a single little box, if you like, and manipulate that separately to the rest of the model. So the way we do that, we go to the Modify tab up in here, and we have these icons at the very end under the Create submenu, and the right hand one that looks like a couple of 3D objects with a light above it is the Create Group icon and tool. If I click on that, we get this little pop-up box. The first thing Revit wants us to do is name the group that we're about to create. If you don't select a name, it will just create a default name. Here it has group 1. If I click OK, that will be the name of our group. The next group I name or create, Revit will tell me it'll be group 2, etc. But I can actually name the groups. And this is really useful if you're trying to find the group later. You can actually search for the group name. So it's worth having something that's logical and meaningful so that you can find it later. Or if you just hover over that group later, you know what it is that is actually contained within that group. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. So we can call this some walls and doors. Underneath that, we've got two different types of group. We've got a model group, which is 3D elements within Revit, walls, doors, floors, etc. And a detail group. The detail group contains text, lines, dimensions, and other detail items that you use for drawing details or putting information onto a view. So we'll stick with a model group at this stage. Click OK. And we go into this little, I'll call it a sandbox, a little protected part of Revit away from the main drawing window. You notice we've got this yellow filter across our screen, and we've got a new little subcategory of icons in the ribbon, and they're called edit group, and that's also yellow, which matches the yellow of that. Now sometimes the first time you open this or create a group, this little menu might be popped out and flying around the screen, as I covered in the ribbon. If you just hover over it, click on the little upside down triangle here, it goes back up into the ribbon, and each time you open that group, create a group tool again, the submenu should appear up in here in the ribbon. But you'll notice that I'm not actually able to do anything to any of the objects in the view. Everything's kind of grayed out, and I can't hover over or select any objects at the moment. So we've got some icons in the top here. I'll deal with these two first, the finish and the cancel. If I click finish, that creates the group and takes me back into the main drawing system with a group created. If I click cancel, it cancels out of this tool and discards the group that I've created or am creating at the time. So these two icons appear a lot in Revit, and they just allow you, if you're within a tool or within a protected little part of Revit like we are now, it allows you to finish and get back to the main drawing area, or to cancel and discard what you're doing and get back to the main drawing area again. Over here we have three more icons. Attach, this one allows us to attach detail group objects to our modeled group. So as I said, we've created a model group which is 3D physical elements within the Revit model, but we can attach text and various detail lines and bits and pieces to this if we want to. It allows us to do that. We also have these two here. We can add objects to the group and remove objects from the group. So let's start with the add objects to the group. If I click on that, you'll see I get a little plus next to my cursor. All the physical 3D objects in the view have come back to being black rather than grey, and I can now hover over and select them. The text and the lines is not, so I can't add those to the group. So to add an object to the group, all I do is click on the element and it will be added to the group. It goes grey, so that tells me I can't now select it, add it to the group because it's already in the group, and I can just go around and add elements to the group, and they will be bound together within the group and tied to each other. So I've selected a piece of wall, I'll grab a bit of a door there. A little quirk within this is if you try to select an object that is hosted inside another object, Revit will have a little bit of an issue with that. So an example of that, these doors I've touched on before about the idea of hosting. The door is hosted within the wall. The wall is necessary for the door to exist. Without a wall, there is no way of creating the door. So I can add the door to the group separately like that. But if I then try and add the wall afterwards, Revit will give me this error down the bottom right hand corner and says I can't do that. And that's because the door itself is hosted in the wall. By adding the door to the group first, I've actually unhosted it or separated the host from separated the hosted object from the host itself. So the way around that is I go back to the remove icon up the top here, and you'll see the objects that are now in the group are black and the ones that aren't in the group are grey. If I click on that one to remove it from the group, go back to add the wall first, and then add the door. Revit is happy with that. So I can just go around and add whatever I want to the group, and it will bind those together. As I just showed, if I want to remove objects, I click on that. The little minus symbol appears next to the cursor. That indicates that I'm removing objects from the group. When I'm finished with the group, I just hit the finish button, and that takes me back into the main Revit drawing system, and it looks much like it did before we created the group. We still have the same objects visible and they still look identical. And if I hover over these elements, we can still grab them separately. But if I hover over an element that is within the group that I just created, we get this blue box around what represents the area of the group. So all the objects in the group are contained within this blue box, and we can see that we have a group present. If I click on that object that's in the group, it selects the entire group, which is these doors here and the walls that are with them, and it allows me to manipulate that group as a whole. I can grab the walls and move it around, and it will move the entire group together as one object. Just undo that. But within that, I can also select the elements within the group without having to edit the group to do that. So if I again select the group and I hover over an object that's within that group, hit the tab key, I can actually select that door there that is within the group. And if I want to, I can modify the door, change its type or whatever I want to do, and it will modify that object. It's still within the group, and if I click on the group, the door is still part of that group of objects, but it is a way that I can actually change it without modifying or going back into that little sandbox and creating a change to the group itself. So I can actually change elements and select elements within the group and move them around and change them if I want. If I want to change the group, either add things to it or remove things from it or change elements within it, if I select that group, we've got 3 icons at the top here. The right hand one allows us to save that group as a separate file. The ungroup one will explode the group and basically put it back into being single elements. And the edit group, if I click on that, will take us back into this yellow little sandbox where I could add, remove, attach. I'm in the same edit group menu, and I can change the elements within that little group without fear of modifying anything that's outside the group. So for instance, you have something like a little bathroom in your project and you want to make sure that the entire bathroom stays together as one object and you don't accidentally affect anything else when you're moving objects within that bathroom. You could create the bathroom floor, walls, toilets, basins, vanities as a group. And then when you want to edit that and move objects around within the bathroom and not affect anything else, you can use this edit group menu or tool to just move objects around within the group and not affect other objects in the rest of the model. So that's how we use groups within Revit. I'm in the edit group at the moment. If I click on finish, I go back into the main drawing system and we still have this group. If I select the group and hit ungroup, as I said, it just explodes and they will go back to being single elements and our group has disappeared.